Welcome to the Explainer. Today we're diving into a fascinating topic. When loyalty isn't corruption, it's pragmatic calculus. We're going to unpack some really incredible data that completely flips our baseline assumptions about workplace ethics, human behavior, and leadership. Let's just jump right in, because what we're going to cover today is going to fundamentally change how you read the decisions of the people around you. Imagine this scenario for a second. You've got a close friend, and they're about to take a highly competitive, incredibly stressful exam. Is sending them a cheat sheet universally, undoubtedly wrong? Now, most corporate ethics frameworks treat not cheating as this universal moral baseline, right? Like an absolute rule etched into a stone tablet somewhere. But if we just assume this rule applies to absolutely everyone equally, we actually miss the hidden logic driving a huge portion of the workforce. It begs the question, does a universal rule really exist? Or is ethics sometimes, well, just a mathematical equation? I want you to pause your assumptions for a minute, because the data here is wild. Researchers conducted a study spanning 47 countries, 13 languages, and over 200 participants, and they found a Pearson correlation of positive 0.2089. Now, the critical reliability threshold was only 0.1374, meaning this result is highly statistically significant. What this shows is that individuals with a very specific psychological profile actually agree with sending that cheat sheet to a friend. And it's not because they're inherently corrupt people, it's because their ethical engine is running on a totally different operating system. So who exactly are the people agreeing with this? If we look through the lens of the spiral dynamics framework, this psychological value system is known as the orange vMEME. Orange represents the results-oriented, strategic achiever. When this specific mindset encounters the cheat sheet dilemma, they do not see a black and white moral failure. Instead, they see a contextual optimization problem. They're actively weighing the bond of loyalty to a close friend against the competitive advantage and the stakes of that specific environment. For them, it is a pragmatic calculus. Now, you might be thinking, okay, maybe they're just looking for an excuse to cheat, but we know that's not true because the data reveals a much broader, highly consistent pattern. Yes, Orange justifies the cheat sheet because of those close ties, but they show a strong negative correlation with concealing a cancer diagnosis from a patient. Why? Because they value patient autonomy and outcome optimization way more than a blanket rule. Similarly, they negatively correlate with the absolute rule of never give false evidence if it means an innocent person is going to go to jail. Across the board, in every scenario, they reject the absolute universal moral prohibition. They are optimizing for the best real-world outcome, not just blindly following the rules. And this is exactly where the friction happens inside our systems. Think about what happens when you put an orange strategic thinker in a room with a blue thinker, someone who values strict, merit-based rules, and a green thinker who prioritizes collective fairness. It is a recipe for a total disconnect. Blue looks at the cheat sheet as a strict rule violation that destroys integrity. Green sees it as a relational betrayal of communal trust. But Orange sees a valid, loyal, strategic exception. It is the exact same dilemma, but they are running three completely different mathematical equations. The danger here is when organizations enforce rigid rules without considering the context. When you do that, you essentially pathologize that orange pragmatism, treating their strategic calculus like it's straight-up corruption. And this sparks a really dangerous escalation. Your orange employees aren't going to actively rebel or throw a fit. Instead, strategic disillusionment sets in. They slip into a state of performative compliance. Smiling, nodding, checking the boxes, all while silently drifting away to optimize their own paths completely outside your framework. Your system's trust just quietly, invisibly erodes. So how do we actually understand and fix this invisible drift? Well, we have to look back to a truly fascinating concept developed during the Cold War by Vladimir Lefebvre. He was a Soviet-American mathematician who introduced what he called the Algebra of Conscience. Lefebvre theorized that human morality, guilt, and decision-making weren't just abstract philosophical debates. They were actual mathematical functions. He believed we could build complex models where very human factors like fear, trust, empathy, and stress are calculable variables in a system. Using Lefebvre's algebra, we can map something called a state vector. Think of this as the soul, or the core psychological position of a company at any given second. But to map it accurately, you can't just look at the surface. Most companies only measure that top layer, behavior and actions. Basically, did you hit your quota? But if you really want to predict behavior, you have to sense the deeper layers. You have to look at motivations, leadership trust, psychological burnout, and structural barriers. You absolutely need all 5 of these layers to hit the bullseye. And this is where the science gets truly mind-blowing. The sheer scale of the global intelligence powering this model today involves 13,000 statistical correlations. We're talking about millions of data points drawn from over 100 countries. These correlations act as a predictive brain, mapping out the butterfly effects of human behavior. It holds thousands of cause and effect links simultaneously, way more than a human brain could ever track on its own. And that is exactly why this kind of math doesn't just apply to ethics. It is the future of everyday management. To put that into perspective, let's look at how management is completely shifting paradigms. The old world math is very mechanical. It's a chainsaw approach. You want to save 50 grand? Okay, fire Dave. Action leads straight to result. Done. But the new world math is biological, and it's powered by those 13,000 correlations. It understands that firing Dave combines with the psychological profile of your remaining team to instantly spike fear. That fear crashes productivity by 20%, which means your attempt to save 50 grand actually just cost you $200,000. Let's look at another real-world example of this new math in action: enforcing unpaid vacation. Notice how the exact same management action causes totally different reactions. For a purple, tribal mindset, it correlates positively. They see it as a bonding ritual sacrifice. The green community mindset also accepts it positively because they are willing to suffer to save a colleague's job. But what about our orange achiever? They reject it entirely. It gets a negative correlation because it blocks their career scorecard and feels horribly inefficient. Literally one action, but 3 completely different butterfly effects. So how on earth do you manage all that chaos? You use a dynamic programming formula, specifically an objective function called J. The whole goal is to maximize J. In this formula, direct financial actions carry a heavy weight of 1.0, but employee fear is weighted at 0.9, and well-being sits at 0.8. This math actively, mathematically penalizes a toxic workplace. It proves on paper that if you terrify your staff just to save a buck, the negative weight of that fear cancels out your financial savings. It literally turns "don't be a jerk" from a cute HR slogan into a verified, optimized mathematical theorem. Which brings us to the near future of technology. By 2026, tools like the SD Navigator interface are going to predict stability scores by balancing those deep psychological sensors like fear and trust against objective weights. But what is truly revolutionary here isn't just the tool itself, but how it's built. It's built through an incredible trend called AI vibe coding. If you haven't heard of it, AI vibe coding allows users to instruct large language models in just plain, everyday language to build complex, interactive dashboards without writing a single line of traditional code. But here's the catch. To build a tool that can actually map these deep ethical dilemmas and predict organizational fear, your AI prompts have to be spiral literate and Lefebvre light. When you prompt it correctly, the AI becomes the ultimate steering wheel. It surfaces these cross-stage frictions and psychological patterns that human managers would completely miss. To practically navigate all this, leaders use a continuous 5-step loop. First, you survey your team to measure those deep psychological sensors. That allows you to profile and map their exact state vector. From there, you weight your systemic values, deciding mathematically just how much well-being matters to your bottom line, and then you run models to catch those butterfly effects before they even happen. Finally, you act, execute the optimal control, and then loop right back to the beginning. We've gone from a simple ethical question about a cheat sheet all the way down into the computable matrix of the human conscience. And I want to leave you with a really profound thought to chew on. If an algorithm, fueled by AI vibe coding and 13,000 correlations, can understand the pragmatic calculus of human loyalty better than our rigid moral rules, what breaks next? If empathy is computable, what does the future of human leadership actually look like? Thank you so much for joining me today, and as always, keep questioning the baseline.